You're juggling a lot. Customer satisfaction, you're juggling employee engagement, you're juggling all sorts of metrics, and key results are what you want. So let's call this the Results Podcast. Have you ever met a CEO who's obsessed with results? He doesn't really measure anything. No KPIs, no dashboards, just vibes. Some of today's managers talk about vibes. It's like driving across the country, shouting, "We're making great time." And you ask, "Where are we?" And he's like, "No idea, but the car feels fast." 3 hours later, the engine explodes and he's like, "Guess the car didn't align with our vision." If you're not measuring things longitudinally over time, that's what that means, longitudinally, to measure it like quarter to quarter, month to month. How do you know if you're improving if you don't measure things? Are you just getting lucky? All MBAs learn about customer satisfaction, but do they embrace customer satisfaction, employee engagement, net promoter scores, or do they miss that these statistics are real tools to create profits by putting money where it needs to be invested? You've got to track these things like customer satisfaction, employee morale, trust levels, even delivery times, because leadership without measurements, that's just guessing. The next time an employee comes into your office and says, "Everyone is upset," be the cool CEO with the facts and say, "That's interesting because 82% of our staff reported being satisfied last week, and you, my friend, scored lowest on team trust." That's the power of data. Let's lead smart and measure what matters. One word: results. Larry Page, co-founder of Google, once said, OKRs have helped us lead to 10 times growth, many times over. Not just 10%, but 10 times, not once, but many times. Why? Because leaders who measure what matters drive what matters. When I sold $1 million a year in research, many clients did not have to be sold because they were leaders. They, in their markets, wanted to get real results and they needed real measurements. HP, Microsoft, and Goodwill were some of my clients. And all these folks knew they needed to measure things, to improve things, to keep their leadership position. Leaders measure, improve, and grow. But you know what's crazy? Everyone with a gas or diesel car knows they should measure the oil level in their car. But business people, they don't even know what the dipstick or dashboard is for their organization. They aren't looking at key metrics. Too often companies think that they're growing, but it's maybe the market is growing and they're not growing. Their market share could be actually shrinking because they're becoming irrelevant. And their competitor, who's about to put them out of business, is grinning because they have all the data and they know how they position themselves better than you can. And they know it's a matter of time before they can buy you or make you go away. So maybe you haven't done a market audit to measure market share. That's a basic temperature check for a business. Your sales can be increasing and you are losing market share, and it can put you out of business. If you were a nurse and you started to work at your business, they'd want to know what the vitals are. What's being measured? Are your vitals good? This episode will walk you through 3 things: why results and measuring things must be the center of your leadership focus, and how top CEOs generate results. And third, and the often ignored spiritual and financial implication of results that either elevate or erode your leadership legacy. If you're like me and you are often swimming in acronyms like this alphabet soup that we've been doing so far, you might say, what the heck are OKRs anyway? Great question. OKRs, objectives and key results, like up behind me, are goal setting frameworks used by individuals and teams and organizations to set clear, measurable goals and track their outcomes. I want to put the cookies on the lower shelf for you. So if you want to learn about OKRs, there are 2 books that I would recommend. Measure What Matters by John Doerr. This is the definitive book on OKRs, and he's a venture capitalist that introduced them to Google, and he made it famous. He has studies from Intel, Google, the Gates Foundation, and Bono's One campaign. Did I ever mention that I have a cousin who's a pastor and interviewed Bono and wrote a book on YouTube? That could be a podcast episode. Anyway, number 2, as far as a book that would be a cookie on the lower shelf to be able to learn about OKRs would be Radical Focus by Christina Wadke. I think that's how you say her name. Wodtke. A practical and readable guide that uses storytelling to explain how teams implement and struggle with OKRs in real world environments. I was often hired to create surveys so that managers could measure these things and see their improvement, or sometimes whether they needed to devote more resources to get the improvement and results that they wanted. I was a preferred research provider for Intel in the Silicon Forest of Oregon when I first learned about objectives and key results, and the concept originated at Intel and was made famous by Google. OKRs help align effort with purpose by answering two key questions. First, objective. What do we want to achieve? This is qualitative at times, ambitious at times, and hopefully inspirational. Key results. How will we measure our progress towards the objective? These are specific quantitative outcomes, usually 2 to 5 per objective. And it's hard for me to think about this without thinking about that I also work for Washington Water Power, and a consultant was working at Washington Water Power, and he came up with SMART goals. I bring this up because a SMART goal is achievable, but sometimes you want to err on the side of audacious and bold to make it inspirational. A consultant I used to work with was a bit vulgar, and he used to say motivational goals should make your butt cheeks clench. Otherwise, it's not a big enough growth goal. Not sure that's a smart end result. Not everyone enjoys a smart aleck either. Sorry. Anyway, story of my life. Example. Objective. Improve customer satisfaction. Key results. Achieve a CSAT score that's greater than 70%. So see how it's a specific key result. And reduce average support ticket resolution time to under 4 hours. Implement a customer service loyalty program with 10,000 signups. These would be measurable things that you could be tracking so you can tell your progress. When I was doing customer satisfaction work for Pacific Court, and it was owned by Scottish Power, I worked with a team that facilitated a survey to raise employee satisfaction, and this was tied to other work we were doing to measure customer satisfaction. And the idea was to grow and lift it enough so that the improvement was there and it could show value of the company increasing. And it was surprising to me that they did that and then sold the power company to Warren Buffett. I might talk to you sometime about the time I spoke right after Warren Buffett. Be careful what you wish for and who you speak right afterwards. When I worked with Bain & Company, they had just one question that they used to determine companies' status, and that was to answer the how likely are customers to recommend you or the product or services. When I worked for Microsoft, we helped them to manage across multiple products to see what product performance was like versus other products by asking a combination of satisfaction, likelihood to recommend, and another thing that I'm going to keep a secret. But we made up an index to compare different products. And the index was just one number, right? So you could tell this product category had this number, and you can compare it to another one. If you were looking at Excel versus PowerPoint, you could say PowerPoint index is better in this moment. And so maybe we need to invest some money and improve Excel, and these things change over time. It's really important to measure as you go to be able to manage them so you can see things early enough to make those key investments that improve things. And where is this important? Important in high tech, when product life cycles are short. With the electric company, the product is pretty much, you want the light switch to go on. But if you're doing something more sophisticated like AI software, you may want to increase your surveying because the product life cycle is going to change a lot. Things are changing rapidly in AI and in high tech. So while I mentioned the loyalty program above, don't take on a loyalty program lightly. I don't mean to say that, every time you do key results, you need a loyalty program. I've seen companies start with loyalty programs and benefits and forget that they started a loyalty program, and they should have stopped a long time ago because customers have been storing up coupons and they're about to kill profits with cashing in their chips for their loyalty program. When they do that all at once, it's kind of scary sometimes. It can be millions of dollars if you're a big enough company. Here's an academic quote from INSEAD, a world-renowned business school in France. OKRs are not just a performance tool, they are a leadership tool. When used well, they serve to clarify intent, focus energy, and build cultures of accountability. And this was a quote from Professor Herminia Ibarra. He's an INSEAD professor of organizational behavior, and he was also at the Harvard Business School faculty group. I actually became a professor for a while because of my organizational behavior professor when I was getting my MBA. Became a dean at an MBA school and asked me to teach their research class. I was a part-time professor and full-time researcher. And if I'm honest, the student hated my first few classes because I did not have enough hands-on stuff for them to play with and keep them engaged in class. But play with what your objectives are and get with your team so that you can put together things that you can improve. Question for you: what is the one result that you've been praying for but haven't been planning for? So this is a way to plan for that result to become a reality. And leadership is not about looking good, it's about doing good, right? So doing good, that requires results. In fact, one of the greatest temptations in leadership is to conflate busyness with productivity. Andy Grove, former CEO of Intel, said, the key result has to be measurable. If it doesn't have a number, it's not a key result. And Andy Grove once did a video call into my actual office on a system called ProShare. It was just a test and a prototype. And I didn't get to talk to him at all, but I always thought it was very cool that he was that hands-on and he was doing a usability test of something that was basically Zoom years before Zoom even existed. I did get to work with some of these same usability engineers and help them set up a test lab in Roy, Utah, after they'd set up one in Hillsboro, Oregon, that I helped with. It's amazing. When I'm coaching VPs or nonprofit execs, startup founders, I've seen it again and again. People need to define the outcome, and then the strategy will show up. Are you leading with vague intentions or clear measurements? Let's dive into what results really mean in practical terms. Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, said, you have to deliver results and you have to deliver them consistently. And that's why you need to measure things consistently as well, so you can tell how you're doing. And she's right. In the leadership space, inconsistent results erode trust faster than bad ideas. Trust is built on predictability, and that's why OKRs matter. So objectives and key results, again, is what OKRs are. They create transparency. So question, would your team say you deliver results consistently or just occasionally? How do you scale results? Start with people, not products. Satya Nadella of Microsoft, the CEO, focused on culture first. He said, ultimately, it's not about product, it's about people. If you don't create a culture of accountability, nothing else matters. I'm a certified Maxwell team member, and part of the Maxwell organization approaches is we would agree that culture is tantamount to results. Why? Because the good news is that only one person can impact culture. The bad news is that only one person can damage culture, and culture can eat strategy for breakfast. So you want better outcomes, build a culture where everyone knows what success looks like. That's what OKRs do. Question, are your people clear on what success looks like in this quarter? Now let's talk about money. Too many leaders treat finance like a dirty word, but here's the truth. If you avoid financial measurements, you're defaulting to a zero-based finance strategy. Comfortable, but not sustainable. Warren Buffett once said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. Finance isn't just about spreadsheets, it's about stewardship. God calls us to steward what we're given, and if your leadership isn't producing a positive cash flow, something's broken in your value chain. And for my entrepreneurial friends, one of the best business coaches I ever had was coaching me, and my sales were down just a bit, and they said, focus on money producing activities first. Focus on money producing activities first when you first get to work, because you won't exist without sales. And if you want to have a leadership role at a company, come up with some ideas that create sales and get attention of the people already at the table. Question, are your leadership decisions generating value, or are you a resource hog, increasing costs and decreasing profits? Results don't just show up, they are designed. That's why elite organizations obsess over metrics. Jeff Bezos said, when the data and the anecdotal information disagree, the data is usually right. In our work with school districts, municipalities, and corporations, we found that the same truth exists. The moment you track the right outcomes, you begin to see the blind spots. Question: are your current metrics showing up, giving you the truth, or hiding it? Here's something I rarely hear leaders talk about: results and righteousness. Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans." Leadership isn't just a financial act, it's a spiritual one. Your results must reflect your values. When you lead with integrity, the fruit shows up in both spreadsheets and spirits. Question: are you committing your results to God, or are you just living with the regrets? Failure teaches us faster than success, but only if you measure it. Howard Schultz of Starbucks said, "Risk more than others think is safe. Dream more than others think is practical." Failure is not the enemy. My friend Ryan Leake, who is also with Maxwell, was a speaker at one of my events, and he said, "Failure can teach you more than success." Get his book and check it out. He has a podcast as well. If you'd like to join the Maxwell Leadership Group, go to bowleadershipgroup.com and contact me. Question: when you fail, do you reflect with data or just emotion? There is a time and a place for emotion, and that's one of the ways you can engage employees is by emotion. Maybe it's time for a mindset shift. Results aren't just for shareholders, they're for soul holders. When leaders generate positive outcomes, financial, emotional, cultural, they bless the people under their care. Indra Nooyi, former CEO of PepsiCo, said, "Leadership is hard to define, and good leadership even harder. But if you can get people to follow you to the ends of the earth, you're a great leader." Question: are the people better off because of your leadership? Let's apply this. At Bow Leadership Group, we use results dashboard. So create a dashboard with those key metrics that you're looking at. Like you look at your speed and your RPMs or your temperature gauge, have a few key metrics that you're looking at as you drive through your week. Include things like one OKR for the quarter, one financial target, or one cultural or emotional wellness metric. Why? Because leadership is holistic and culture supports strategy. Question: what 3 results should you track this quarter that are your temperature, tachometer, and speed limit in your dashboard? You should focus on OKRs, finance, and culture as 3 areas that you could improve and measure. I was once coaching a CEO who was hitting every sales target, but losing key team members every month. Why? Because he tracked profit, but not people. Your scoreboard determines your story. Don't forget employee metrics and constantly check with your people. If you say, "I don't have time to check with my people," then you're both a poor delegator and also should not be leading anyone. As my mentor, John Maxwell, said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, question: is your scoreboard causing collateral damage? Jesus said in Luke 14:28, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost?" Spiritual wisdom tells us to count the costs. In leadership, this means measuring the impact, financial and otherwise, of our actions. One of the greatest market researchers I ever worked with once told me he hated it when people quoted scripture. So I hope I haven't offended you with any scripture. There's wisdom in scripture, I believe, even if you don't believe in the underlying messages. But I had never quoted scripture to this person, and I'd never said anything about my faith with him. So it was kind of unusual. So I did say to him, "You might be missing some wisdom." And he said, "Yes, I do wish for more wisdom," and that he was missing something. Scripture helps us to understand what we've been looking at for centuries as people and what leadership and teamwork looks like when it works and when it fails. So the same brilliant researcher that I was talking about failed to start his own research company several times because he didn't want anyone giving him scripture or any other kind of advice, as his employees never stayed because they didn't feel like what they said mattered. People want to know that they matter, right? I want to know that I matter. If people are giving to your cause and you're a nonprofit leader, they want to know that what they're giving is going to make a difference. So that's the cost of not being open to employees' ideas. Question: have you counted the cost and listened to employees, or just hope for the best? You may know I'm a private pilot, but let's land this plane. Results matter. They honor God. They protect your mission. They shape your legacy. But never forget, profits without purpose can be dangerous. And as you lead this week, commit to clarity, accountability, and purpose. Go to Bow Leadership Group and ask for a meeting if you'd like to set up your dashboard or talk about it. Keep tuning into this podcast and advertise to your mind so you become the leader God designed you to be. Bless your week.